quilters, and thank you once again for joining me as we embark upon another project. 3 years ago, my grandsons gave me this book as a birthday gift. And initially I loved it because my grandsons had given it to me. But I was in a bad place in my life at the time, and I was so busy I did not have time to truly investigate what was inside. Plus, to be honest, I already owned several books with lots of blocks in them. You know, I have one that says 5,500 blocks, another one that says 500 blocks, another that says 100 blocks. So I just thought, well, I can put this down for a minute. But once things got a little better for me and I had time to really look at the book, I opened it and was pleasantly surprised. There are new blocks in here as well as old blocks that have been updated. And all of the blocks in here have been designed by some of the leading designers in the quilting industry. I visited some of their websites and was immediately won over. There are applique blocks, foundation pieced blocks, mixed technique blocks, and pieced blocks. And the blocks that I will share with you as we go through this project are pieced blocks. I made a quilt using one of the blocks because I was so intrigued by it. This little one right here down in the corner. It's called Oblique, and the quilt is absolutely beautiful. So I knew I was hooked, and then I decided to use another block called Pinwheel Polka. That too created a beautiful quilt. So then I wanted to just make quilts and quilts and quilts using these blocks, but realized with everything else I have going on, I just didn't have the time to make a quilt using all of the blocks in the pieced block section of the book. I mean, that's pretty much the whole 1/3 of the book. So I decided to make a sampler quilt. And in that decision, I decided to share my journey with this sampler quilt with those of you that look at me on my YouTube channel. Now, each page in the book has directions for making the blocks on the page. And I'm going to share all of the information about each block with you as we go through it. Most importantly, I will share the designer so that you can go to that designer's website and you may even get more ideas for things you want to do with your quilting. There's also a CD included in this book that has templates, patterns, and other information needed to construct some of the blocks. When I share a block that requires a template, I will show you how to make the template. So if you have a little piece of cardboard, nothing fancy, the kind that you get out of shirts when you buy new shirts, or the back of a notebook, or if you have old folders, old file folders, they work. Or you may have some quilter's template plastic. Either one of these will do. Don't run out and buy anything. When we get to the point where you have to construct a template, any one of those will work. You'll just make the template out of your cardboard, trace around it on your fabric, cut the fabric out, and we will be ready to move on with constructing the block. If you have a copy of this book, I would suggest you go get it, dust it off, and get ready to use it as we go on this journey for completing my sampler. Now, let's talk about the fabrics I plan to use. I decided to pull out some of my African fabrics, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those next. I thought this sampler would be a good time to use some of the African fabrics that I have stored in my stash. I think of African fabrics as divas, so I'm reluctant to put a lot of them together. Like so many divas, each is beautiful in its own way. They know they are beautiful, and they each want to shine. So often, they are used in quilts where they are crammed together and the integrity of the individual fabrics is compromised. So I like to use them so that their true beauty can be seen and appreciated. Thus, I include a supporting cast. So let's look at each of the fabrics I have. I chose this fabric with the orange and the red and blue first. It was given to me by a dear friend, and it's been in the cabinet waiting for just the right project to come along, and I thought this would be the right project. So then I went to my other fabrics based on this. This has blue, so then I went to this fabric to use the blue that's in there. And although this has a large print, when it's cut into smaller pieces, that large print will not be a factor. This fabric also has red, and I have loved this piece of red for a long time. And you can see just how intricate it is. It has its own set of beautiful colors running through it. I love the fact that there are parts of it that are almost ombre, from red to orange to yellow, and then from blue to red, blue, green with the black stripe. So I'm looking forward to cutting that. Then I thought, well, we need one more. Somehow I just didn't feel that the 3 would be enough. So I decided to go to my color wheel, and I chose this fabric because green is a complement of red, and there's a lot of green in this piece of fabric. So there are my fabrics. These are my African fabrics that will go into the blocks that I will make for the sampler quilt. Now remember I said I like to have a supporting cast. I like to have something that calms down the action. When we have a lot of African fabrics together, sometimes our quilts can look too busy. And when they're very, very busy, physically our eyes cannot look at them. And I don't know of anyone who wants to put a lot of time and effort into creating a quilt that no one can look at. So here is my supporting cast. These are 2 grunge fabrics. This is a very pale beige. It isn't white. It may look white, but it's a very pale beige. And then this is the other grunge. It's a blue. And I chose that because of the blue that I have here. I just think they work well together. The beige is so neutral that it just works well with all of this, bar none. So here are the fabrics that will be used throughout the blocks in the sampler. I tried to be aware of the fact that these colors are going to be placed beside each other from time to time. So I want them all to be compatible. I also am using the same fabrics throughout the sampler because I want the quilt to have cohesiveness. I've seen sampler quilts where every block has its own set of fabrics. And while the blocks are pretty, they look like they don't belong together. So I want this quilt to be very cohesive. I want you to see, or whoever looks at it to see, pretty much the same fabrics throughout so that the whole quilt ties together as one. None of the blocks that I'm making will use all of the fabrics at any one time. So I'm going to mix and match using just these 6 fabrics, not introducing any others. And as I said before, I'm doing that because I want the quilt to be cohesive. Now I'm going to make 15 blocks, and I know 15 sounds like an odd number. but I do have a good reason for it. I like to make big quilts. The blocks in this book are 12.5-inch in finished size. That's my kind of block. I love big blocks. I also like big quilts. So I've chosen 15 blocks. I will make 2 of each block, which will give me 30 blocks. And when I put a couple of borders on those 30 blocks, I'll have a big quilt the size of a king-size bed. That's my kind of quilt. Now, let me stop. You might decide to make something smaller, which is fine. You may even decide to take your quilter's graph paper and quilter's template plastic and make the blocks smaller. You may not want 12.5-inch blocks. That's fine. You may decide that you like one block better than the others and you want to make a whole quilt with just that one block. These are all the decisions you're going to make as we go through this. Once again, I'm going to share 15 blocks with you. You're going to treat what I share in the way that you think is best for you. When you finish the quilt, your quilt, it only has to please you. Consequently, any design decisions that you make are only making sure that your quilt pleases you. Each week, I will share at least 1 or 2 blocks, and until I have completed all 15 of the blocks. Once I complete my quilt, I'll upload pictures of that so that you can see it. So, quilters, gather your fabrics, gather your tools, your rulers, your rotary cutter, etc., etc. Fire up your sewing machine, put a new needle in it. You're starting a new project, put a new needle in your sewing machine. Pre-wind some bobbins so that when you're sewing, you don't have to stop to wind a bobbin. Pre-wind about 5 or 6 extra bobbins. So as you run out of bobbin thread, just change the bobbin and keep moving. Go to your stash and pull out that African fabric that you've been holding on to because you didn't quite know what to do with it or you were afraid to cut it. Try it in this project just as I'm trying mine. I have gotten over that fear of cutting African fabrics. Now I don't mind cutting them because I've taught myself to cut them in ways that they can still shine and make an impact on the design of a project. So, having completed this introduction to our sampler quilt, let's make a quilt together.